when we left off, we were kind of chatting last time. We were talking a bit about the, I believe it was called the Black Patch Tobacco Wars.
Yes.
Let me see here. I'm just going to pull this up so I have it for reference. What we were talking about. Okay.
Yeah, there's a book about that time period and those wars, called On Bended Knee.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's been out of print for a really long time. I occasionally find it on eBay, but every time that I have found it, when I dig in more, it's a dead entry. It's a dead listing from some time back, and it's not actually in stock anywhere. So I've never actually been able to find a copy and order it. But from what I understand, written by a man who experienced it firsthand.
Oh, okay. Gosh, yeah, there's a lot of books called On Bended Knee. I just looked it up real quick. There's ones about Reagan. There's like ones about praying and stuff.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, I guess the true here it is right here. I got it. The true story of the Night Rider Tobacco War in Kentucky and Tennessee.
Right.
All right. On Bended Knees. Bill Cunningham.
Yeah. So that was going on early 1900s. I know when last we talked, I kind of had my dates screwed up, but yeah, 1904 to 1909.
Yeah. Have you read this book, by the way? I'm sorry, I just wanted to...
What's that?
I wanted to ask you, have you read this book? Or you say you've never been able to find it?
No, I have not. It was recommended to me by one of the salesmen that I work with, who grew up on a dark-fired Kentucky farm in Kentucky. I clarify, he grew up on a dark-fired Kentucky farm in Kentucky, because
right.
He could have grown up on a dark-fired Kentucky farm anywhere in the world.
Right, exactly. Do me a favor, because I'm gonna send this to you right now. I found it. I'm buying it. What's your address?
Oh, you don't have to do that, man.
No. Come on, man. This is already done. Deal. I'm typing it in right now. What's your address?
All right. Well, I'll text you my address since we're recording. Man, that's so cool. Thank you so much. You definitely...
Yeah, no, you're welcome.
Did not have to do that.
No, but I want to do this because, I think that stuff like this is kind of actually pretty important, because... just learning these histories and kind of keeping these in mind as we go and we move through our lives, that's how, I think about, the way that they built the pyramids. That technology, lost. The way that they built Stonehenge, how did they do it? No idea. Mm-hmm. Down to, thatching roofs in England. There was a way that they did it with, all those, twigs and stuff. Technology, lost.
Right.
We can't even do it today if we wanted to. So, I always, as a photographer, looked at myself kind of I'm like a historian. I was with Whitney Houston the night before she died, right? I'm at the...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm at the club. I'm the only photographer that they gave a backstage full access pass to. So, I go into the club, I go downstairs, I'm with Whitney, I see the fight that she gets into, we go back into the corner. So, I'm there, but my whole thing is that, I'm there to kind of take the photos, but I'm also there to kind of preserve the history of the event. You know what I mean? And
yes.
That's just that was just the way that I looked at my time, being a photographer in Hollywood. And so for me, as I do this kind of gig, I look at it kind of in the same way. So I'm really glad that I was able to find this for you and ship it out your way, because you'll be able to actually have this history, and it'll influence you as you go on blending.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a really, really in-depth and thoughtful way of looking at it, and I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I like collecting old books about tobaccania and specifically about tobacco blending where I can find them. There aren't that many,
right?
Truthfully, there's just not a lot of books that it's sort of. It's books that are books that have been published in like the 40s, 50s, and 60s that are as difficult to come by now as the lost technologies that you were talking about that are much, much older.
Right.
It's crazy. Duke University published a lot of papers and a lot of articles and a lot of books about tobacco that are basically just gone, except for copies that are in their university library.
Wow.
And I've had to track down some of these things. Like I found a couple of these books about things like Oriental tobacco and such that are really, really tough to come by. I've found them in Russia.
Wow.
So
did you
interesting.
Did you visit Russia, or did you just buy them from there?
Oh, I just found a seller in Russia that was offering a copy of one of the books that I had been looking for some time. Yeah.
That's awesome. I would really like to visit Russia, actually, because I think it's beautiful. So let's...
I really want to, too. I've never been.
Yeah, me either. Okay, so what I kind of wanted to flow with this was that, like, you had a time during the Black Patch Tobacco Wars, just kind of tell us the story, because people would love to hear, the history that you know about it. So just, if you could just take it from the top.
Sure. So I don't have a real in-depth understanding of this. It's part of the reason that I wanted to get this book about the Night Riders, because I know that there was a lot of in-depth reasons that things happened and such. But basically, the broad strokes are that the American Tobacco Company was a monopoly. And essentially controlled what the price of tobacco could be, and dictated prices to the farmers, and did not necessarily communicate well with the farmers why. One would get paid one way and one would get paid another way. There wasn't a real clear system of communication by which manufacturers of chewing tobacco and pipe tobacco and rolling tobacco could communicate to farmers directly what they were looking for, what the manufacturers were looking for in tobacco they wanted to use.
Right.
And so that ended up becoming, this sort of stranglehold that this monopoly had over what they would pay their farmers for their crops. And so farmers were eking out an existence, backbreaking work and barely making anything to show for it. And of course the monopoly is sitting pretty with all of this tobacco that they can charge whatever they want. And so some farmers were loyal to the American Tobacco Company, and some farmers were, kind of went rogue, and so it ended up with people getting killed. It ended up with lots and lots of barns being burned, and they call it a war, and it really kind of was, and so it sounds like a very, very fascinating and oft overlooked little bit of history from this time period. Is where the USDA was actually founded, which is pretty interesting. The USDA was basically founded in order to create a system by which pricing could be standardized.
Right.
That quality could be described in an official and agronomic way, and that everyone could basically agree on what the standards of quality were, and how a tobacco crop could, or a particular grouping of tobacco leaves could be categorized and qualified as well as quantified in terms of value.
Yeah. So
so through the course of this, basically, you end up with R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris, the monopoly splitting in half, and half of it becoming Philip Morris and the other half of it becoming R.J. Reynolds. And you end up with tobacco farmers that actually are in the halls of Congress, designing with Congress a code, a grading code, so that they could know what their targets were in order to have the best chance of selling to the manufacturers that wanted to buy their product.
Right. Okay, so it's really interesting because I follow. There's all kinds of places you can follow stuff on Facebook. I'm following a group of tobacco farmers, and a lot of it is guys that are over there in Africa, Malawi. They're in Cameroon. They're growing.
Sure.
These are just guys that are basically. It's really interesting because they're almost like DIYer guys that are just looking to get into how do I grow? I want to grow tobacco, and you see every day, you see 5 to 10 guys. How much is the price of tobacco? What's the price of tobacco here? What are you getting for this? Because nobody really seems to know over there. It's just you could have one guy, just like you said, come around, buy up everybody's tobacco for nothing, make a monopoly, and be cornering the market. But I guess one of the things that's so interesting to me about the Black Patch Tobacco Wars is that here you had these guys that were out there working hard, you know what I mean? And all that they wanted was a fair trade, a way to define what the quality was so that they could meet goals and know what they were going to get for their work, right?
Right.
So can you talk?
That's exactly right.
So can you talk about how that they, what was, I noticed that they went and seized, crops in Princeton, just kind of reading over the history real loosely. From Wikipedia, they raided Princeton, Hopkinsville. James Buchanan the Duke of North Carolina was an ambitious businessman and planter who learned quickly the profit of tobacco was in buying and selling, not producing it. So you have these guys that basically do you know the story of Cecil Rhodes?
I don't.
Okay, the reason that we pay so much for diamonds is because Cecil Rhodes was he created this company, you probably heard of it, called De Beers.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So everybody remembers the commercials, the black and white and the diamond shining. That's a cartel, just like the American Tobacco Company.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So it protects the price of diamonds and keeps them high because diamonds aren't nearly as rare as we think they are. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's actually
yep.
So I think that one of the things that's very interesting about it is that the farmers faced a time of inequality and, they had to fight, you know what I mean? And it's a very American story, right? They actually kind of got together and was screw this, we're not taking it. You know what I mean? So what I would like to kind of go from this point in the interview is, because I would like to hear right now your input on quality of leaf. So when you're going into, you're getting your clay pipes together and you're going into Taste Virginias and you're looking at the Virginias, your quality of leaf is really high. How are you getting the best quality? I mean, what is it like now? Is it easy to get into places? Is it hard to find the best leaf?
I don't think that it is hard for us to find good leaf. I credit a great deal of our ability to find good leaf to just simply creating relationships with the companies that we buy from, and knowing what our chemistry targets are, knowing what our coloration targets are, knowing what leaf stock position of a particular type of tobacco we're interested in, and then just asking for samples. I will have plenty of leaf of a particular grade that I'm very happy using in storage, and reach out to a leaf dealer and say, hey, what do you have that is in this ballpark, like while we've got plenty of leaf on hand, I'll reach out and just ask, hey, what do you have right now?
Right.
In U.S. leaf, you know, flue-cured Virginia, I'm looking for B1Ls. That would be leaf, first quality, lemon. I'm looking for, you know, smoke and leaf. I'm looking for H and double H grades, or I'm looking for mahogany, whatever it is. And I'll just put out feelers constantly. Mm-hmm. So it's a regular part of my routine to just reach out and ask if there are samples available. And if I find something that works really well for us, we'll go ahead and reserve it, because I don't want to find myself later on down the road not able to get exactly what I want.
Now, who are you calling? Are you calling farmers directly?
No. We deal with 3 different large leaf dealing companies. And so I've got a sales rep at each one of them. And between the 3 of them, we can literally cover the globe in terms of where things are grown and what is currently available. And so some things I'm of course, you know, like I'm getting Oriental from Greece or from Turkey, or perhaps one of the Balkan regions, or maybe even Thailand. But you know,
are you buying from Africa?
That's different than. No, currently we don't use any Empire Virginias.
Say that again.
Or Burley, for that matter. We've used dark fired from Italy, mm-hmm. But no, we haven't used Virginia dark fired or Burley coming out of Africa.
Is there a reason for
that? That I really like U.S. Burley, and I really like U.S. flue-cured.
Right.
And
that's good. That's good practice.
We're a small U.S. company, and I want to support U.S. farmers. Mm-hmm. If the leaf quality is there, obviously it's not going to be like, well, we're just using U.S. leaf because it's U.S. If it didn't taste right, we wouldn't, we would find something else. But I like supporting U.S. farmers where we can, because we are a small U.S. company ourselves.
Amen to that. So can we say that Autumn Evening is 100% made in America?
That is correct.
That's beautiful. All right, so let's touch for a moment on the big. I think it's like we talked about it last time about Mike from McClelland's, about what he said about when he's leaving the business, that basically he's got to get out of the business because nobody knows how to grow leaves anymore.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people disagree with that.
Yeah.
What's your take?
I mean, I think there's a lot of really good quality leaf that is available, and you can simply look and see all of the good quality pipe tobacco that is available to kind of understand that. The difficulty that one can find oneself in finding a particular quality of leaf, and I don't mean quality in terms of like whether or not something is good, but like if you are looking for a leaf that bears a particular quality, a particular flavor, a particular aroma, that may take some digging to find the thing that has just the je ne sais quoi that you are seeking. But I've never found myself completely unable to find that leaf. I've never found myself completely unable to source the tobacco that I wanted in the quantity that I needed.
Okay, but let's talk about historical ornamental leaf. Let's talk about stuff like Yaninji. Can you get Yaninji today? No. Now,
Oriental is a totally different ballgame than flue-cured or Burley is. Oriental is tough because of all the little growing regions in an area that is very politically unstable. And it's important to note as well that in pipe tobacco or in pipe smoking, we often think in terms of Orientals. Oh, that's in English mixtures. That's in Oriental mixtures. Those go with Virginias and with Perique. And we think of everything in terms of like, oh, that's pipe tobacco. But it's important to point out that Virginia, Burley, and Oriental are only available in the small quantities that pipe tobacco manufacturers are able to use them, because they're grown in truly large quantities to supply the cigarette trade. Mm-hmm. So Oriental tobacco, we may not think of it as being cigarette tobacco, but it certainly is. And as cigarette smoking has declined over the years, it has been less and less worth all of the farmers' time in Greece and in Turkey and all across the Balkan regions to grow enough leaf in their individual growing regions that those regions would be kept separate. And so what you have is fewer farmers needed, and thus, rather than having individual growing regions, you've got more and more consolidation.
Right. So when you get consolidation, you're basically losing the individualness of the leaf because you don't have the growing region from which it's really named for. Is that what you're kind of talking about?
Yeah. So you no longer have. There may be a couple of farmers in the region that once produced Black Sea Sokum. You may have some farmers in the region that has traditionally produced Yindige and Drama, but not in the quantities necessary to keep that growing region's product distinct and separate. Rather, they end up being massed together into Oriental blends, Oriental mixes, primarily sold to the cigarette market.
Well, it sounds like that there's a possibility that the problem might just be one of qualification then, because certainly these places are all still growing this stuff, and like you said, it sounds like it's just getting packaged as Orientals altogether instead of its individual region.
Right, exactly. So that's kind of my point, that it is being consolidated in that way, rather than there being so much demand that all of these individual growing regions can support the number of farmers necessary to really be able to, we've got this little tobacco market, and there are artisan make that are able to get small quantities of this leaf. Basically, all of that just gets thrown in with a number of other crops in that basic region, mm-hmm. and then that becomes a regional blend, mm-hmm. That again is largely sold to cigarettes. So.
Of course.
We're able to get Bosma, we're able to get Izmir, we're able to get Catarini, but by and large, getting a lot of the Oriental varietals that used to be more freely available is more and more difficult, or basically impossible in some cases all the time. Like Yindige, we'll never see that again, probably.
Okay, well, let's
much like the Shekel Dent and the Syrian Latakia, we'll never see that again.
Okay, so I met a fellow recently. I won't disclose exactly who he is because I don't know if he wants me to, but I met a fellow that grew up in that region, and he said the same thing. It's impossible. And first of all, nothing is impossible. And second of all, I know guys that, have spent a lot of time in that region as missionaries doing outreach and stuff like that. And I think that the future So there's a lot of guys that are going around on YouTube telling you like, hey, take your lawn out of your front and backyard and plant, they're planting microgreens. They're selling them to local restaurants. So you can go into a local restaurant. Let's say you've got, let's say you've got 2 acres of land. You got a long lot or something. You dig up your lawn, you plant microgreens. Those guys are pulling $100,000 a year down off of what used to be their lawn, right?
Right.
So, like, I mean, there's guys in Syria that would kill to have a job. You know what I mean? Like, in the region of Latakia, who would, go out, if somebody made a phone call and throw some seeds out and put some water down. I mean, it's not even something that would even be hard to do. To be honest, you just need a guy on the ground over there. And I've traveled in countries like this. I mean, it's something that you make happen with $5 and a smile. You know what I'm saying?
Well, maybe, but I think that any tobacco farmer would tell you that it is backbreaking work. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, you've got not only the growing issue to consider, but the curing issue, which really requires a lot of in-depth understanding of the particular style of curing that you're trying to evoke.
Absolutely.
And a lot of you need somebody who really knows exactly what they're doing and
Absolutely.
knows how to respond in all the various ways that they might need to respond in order to get the cure to go the way that you as the manufacturer would want it to go. It's why Dark Fired was the place that the USDA code started, because I mean you're talking about farmers that and their families are losing sleep. Nobody sleeps for 14 to 16 days because their whole crop is in the top of a barn with a fire underneath it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And with sun curing, which is what you've got in Oriental style tobaccos, mm-hmm. It is constantly chasing the sun for 5 to 6 days, constantly angling these trays of leaves to get just the perfect and even sun curing that you can. And to get that, they would sew each individual leaf together by hand, and drape them in blankets on these little A-frames that they could then rotate to follow the course of the sun. And then the second that it was exactly where it needs to be, then the leaf gets covered up and moved back into a barn so that you don't bake it. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely a lot of work.
Okay.
Latakia, you have to fire cure for 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. So, well, yeah. Let me just kind of address just that, because that's honestly labor is the easiest part. When the State Department went to Iraq, because they sent a lot of my good friends over there to do things. That they created a lot of issues. But when the State Department went over there to build things, they built like a chicken plant, right? Because they were like, okay, the Iraqis are buying chickens for $5 a piece from the Brazilians. They're frozen. We'll build a chicken processing plant. That way we can create jobs. They can process chickens. The State Department goes over there. They fully mechanize the thing. It only employs 2 people. It spits out a chicken at the other end that's $7. It's $2 more than the Brazilian chicken, right? And my whole thing is that one of the best ways to spread American I don't know about hospitality, but just like the American way is man, you go over there, you find some farmer. I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, I've seen guys that work in India. They don't they work without shoes, man. They'll work for 25 cents a day, and if you could get something created like this over there to where it would give them jobs, they would be so thankful for it. You know what I mean? It would be something that would really be kind of amazing. And like I was trying to say with the guy that's making $100,000 off of his yards,
mm-hmm.
It's really just a matter of money, because even in these places of conflict, if you can get some guy in there on the ground and just give him money to grow a crop, he'll do it. You know what I mean? Like, and he'll be glad to do it. And, you know, he'll likely be able to get other people to protect him, because we're not talking about, you know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about something that anybody's going to want to, like, come and raid. So, you know, and if we know, you know, this guy I met, I'm having lunch with him later. I'm like, I want to talk to him about stuff like this. But, you know, the reason I say this is because I think that, you know, with Cornell Diehl being like a boutique blender, really, almost, right? Wouldn't you say that?
Yes, we are.
I mean, because you're not like an R.J. Reynolds. You're more of like a, you know, you're creating all these blends. You're bringing out new ones all the time and limited releases. You know, like, I think of you guys as like a craft brewery more than like a, you know what I mean? Like a, I don't know.
Yes, absolutely. We're a small company.
Yeah. But even in the way that you're more agile, like you're taking, you know, chances, you're putting out all these different blends with these great, like, man, like Sun Bear was just out of this world. You know what I mean? Like, it was such a...
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and look at we're talking about right now, the Oriental tobaccos, you know what I mean? So, and the reason I say this is because I guess I just want to play devil's advocate, or not devil's advocate, I shouldn't say that at all. I want to play Mike's advocate for a second, because he's not here, obviously, to defend himself, but I do remember talking with Joe, and, you know, Joe was talking about, you know, McClelland's used Yenenji in a lot of their blends, and, you know, they had a lot of Balkan blends that use probably specific ornamentals. So, you know, in that case, you know, maybe Mike is right in that sense when some of those varietals aren't available like they used to be.
That's definitely true, but that's been true for a long time. That was true at the time that the Grand Oriental series that McClelland released came out.
Right.
Those tobaccos were already really, really difficult to come by, and they produced, I believe, that entire line in mid 2007, and never made those again. All of it that was available, even to the day that they closed the doors, had been tinned up in 2007. So in those instances, yes, it definitely is true that it is tough to get, or impossible to get, some of that leaf, and that it will probably never come back. But that was true long before they ever decided to close up shop.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's good that we at least kind of addressed that question. Now, let me just ask you then, and just kind of like, because, you know, I've talked to Pease about it, and he kind of says that he feels a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, but he's a little, mystified, I guess, by Mike's statement that there's no good leaf available, because there still is really high quality leaf available. So when you're going to select that leaf, like, what is a high quality leaf to you? Because you're really going to shred it up. Are you buying like full leaf together? Are you buying mostly, like, how does that work?
We buy leaf that is, typically we are buying leaf that is already stripped, unless it's something like Casturi, where, the way that it is packaged in Indonesia is whole leaf, and they actually lay these bales out in this really beautiful kind of zigzag pattern, and then dry it down that way and wrap it in burlap. So what that means for us is that Casturi is a really long and involved and labor-intensive leaf to use. If we've got something that's already stripped, then we get more yield out of it, because we don't have to strip it, and we don't have to pay per pound only to lose roughly 30% in stems. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we buy already stripped leaf wherever we can.
Absolutely.
And quality is not about that so much as it is about flavor and mellowness and the desirable aspects of strength, and the desirable aspects of sweetness and character and mellowness and richness and all those kinds of things. So I get on the phone with one of my leaf guys, depending on what the leaf is. It helps me kind of figure out who I'm calling. And then we talk about color gradation that I'm looking for, nicotine strength, and if it's a flue-cured or oriental, then sugar. And we establish stock position, and then I just ask for samples. And so at any given time, I could be sitting on 10 or 12 samples of a particular type of tobacco that is, at least in chemistry and on paper, something that would work for us. But I don't ever buy anything without actually smoking it and using it in some blends and verifying that it will work for us and that it is what we want.
When you talk about chemistry, what are you doing to do those analyses? Are you doing like an assay of the leaf?
No, thankfully, again, part of that whole way that quality is still clearly there, and in fact it's gotten better in a lot of ways, is the constant moving forward of science, right? So the leaf dealers that we deal with have laboratories, and they can be very precise about how much reducing sugar is in this particular grade of this particular crop of flue-cured, and how much nicotine is present. So I keep track of what chemistries we're currently using, and that helps me to target where I need to be looking when I'm trying to find something to replace it, so that we can be seamless as we use through one crop and move into another crop. That from the consumer-facing standpoint, it is a seamless transition.
Okay, let me ask you this. I just want to kind of go back to the Black Patch Tobacco Wars, because they established those systems of numbers and gradings that you still use today, correct?
That's correct.
So in doing so, they were able to kind of basically quantify what they had, and by even like the fighting and everything kind of gave everybody that was what made people pay attention to them. But what they needed to do was quantify what they had, and that was how they could get the money that they, it made it harder probably for the American Tobacco Company to kind of push them around.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And today they've, like you said, they've gone through, now they do it with chemistry, and that's amazing. Just one more thing that I want to ask to, because I don't think we just really properly kind of addressed it. And you mentioned something last time when Mike was saying that, he kind of, didn't want to stay around because he couldn't find good leaf. And you were saying that that good leaf is still there, and that even that you had purchased a lot of the leaf that he had in his stock and you were using it?
Yes, we did. We did buy some Virginia that was very comparable to Virginia that we're currently using. So it fit right into our production. We also were able to buy some of the Orientals that they had in storage, and those also matched up to some Oriental blends that we've had. So yeah, we were able to secure some tobacco from them. We also bought one piece of machinery from them.
Oh, what was it? Do you mind asking?
It was a cutter.
Flake cutter?
Yeah, one of the. Yes. Yep.
Can you tell us which blends it's used on, just as a tidbit?
Well, we don't really have, a bunch of blends, like more than I would be able to just list.
Right, but I guess it's used on any of your flake cut blends, I guess, probably.
Say again?
It's probably used on all of your flake cut blends, I would say then.
Yes, we have two cutters of the same old English make. One is the one that we bought from McClelland. According to the date tag that's on the side of it. It was built in the 1940s, the mid 1940s, and then we have a smaller and older version of that same cutter that we've been using for a long time. That came from the same company, from Robert Legg in England. It was made in the 1930s. So either of those cutters could be used to cut our flake, but we can also arrange them to be able to cut cube cut. We can use them to cut ribbon components. So they're versatile machines.
Nice.
But we only had one, and so yeah, it was very nice to be able to purchase that piece of equipment from McClelland.
Nice. Okay, let me just got a couple of questions for the end.
Okay.
Number one, I noticed in this tobacco shop that I went to the other day, they have like blends in Ziploc bags that say 2006 year blend of the year. So they've got like a whole drawer of stuff that's completely dry. I think it happens to a lot of guys. They open up a tin, they leave it open, they come back to it. What's your favorite way to rehydrate tobacco? And don't say orange peels.
No, not orange peels. My favorite way is Boveda packs. Get yourself a 60 gram, 72 or 75% Boveda pack. Put that baggie, or empty the contents of the baggie rather into a jar, and leave it with the Boveda pack. And I would say check it once a month for 2 or 3 months. It may take that long, but you will have better luck that way with a really slow introduction of moisture to the tobacco than you will trying to actually spritz it with anything. The temptation there is always to over humidify, and it's very easy to do. And so that Boveda pack way is definitely my preferred way.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I actually have been using the same method. Yeah, because I'm in California, in Hollywood, which has got great. It's great weather, but at the same time, if it all is hot, you spray some leaf with water, you're looking at mold.
Yep.
Okay, that leads me to my next question: mold versus bloom. It's a hot topic.
This has been a debate forever. It probably won't ever not be a debate. But I think that if you notice off smells that smell like spoilage, that smell like rotten milk, if you are seeing a fluffy, springy, or dusty growth on your tobacco that is green or gray or black or yellow, that is active fruiting mold, and is evidence that your tobacco has not in and of itself spoiled, but that it is a substrate that is offering moisture to feed a colony of mold spores. Bloom, on the other hand, if we're talking about white speckling that does not seem to rub off of the tobacco, can be caused by any number of things. And I've seen instances where it's just simply leaf, that the leaf itself was fermented and has what we call frog's eyes on it.
Can you explain frog's eyes?
Leaf post-curing fermented and has little white spots on it. And if you've got a heavily fermented burley, then you might notice. I mean, and it's a natural thing on the leaf. It is not a growth. It is a discoloration in the leaf. You'll also see times where it looks kind of like a dried powder of some kind, and that could be any number of things. I don't think that any laboratories are doing hardcore analysis of the microbial activity in a tin of pipe tobacco. But mold is fluffy, fuzzy, and typically gives off a bad aroma, a musty and moldy milk kind of aroma.
Yeah, it smells south of cheese.
Yep. If it smells good, then it's probably not mold.
Right.
If it smells spoiled, that is mold.
Well,
if it's fuzzy and standing up off the surface of the tobacco, that is mold.
You know, Joe Langford says the same thing too, and I think most tobacco people do. Every person that's lived their lives around tobacco said the same thing. Like, bloom is not mold; it's some kind of crystallization of the sugar of the leaf, because there's a difference too between, I think, what some people would consider bloom. And what some people like. If you look at Penzance, it's always got it, that sugary crystallization.
Mm-hmm. It can be caused by a number of things. It can be caused by casing. If you've got a particularly high sugar quantity in your casing, then when the casing dries down, you're going to end up with almost like a shellacking of sugar. And so it can give off this sort of crystalline-like shimmering aspect.
Yeah, I see that all the time.
Yeah, there's so many different things that it could be, and as I say, I just don't think that there's been any sort of hardcore scientific analysis of the microbial activity on pipe tobacco.
So here's the thing: is that somebody in the cigar world sent I got to open the paper, but they sent about 6 samples or.
I saw that where they guys that this is my old H. Upmann that I've been storing in my humidor for 12 years, and it's perfectly speckled with what I believe to be bloom, and then they analyzed it in the lab and found that it was a particular kind of spore, a particular kind of mold,
right,
or fungus.
Right. What's your talk specifically to that? Like, what was your take on that?
Just because it is a mold or fungus doesn't necessarily mean that anything bad has happened. I mean, in terms of winemakers, there is such a thing as noble rot, mm-hmm. And there are secondary fungus that come along and basically refined sugars in grapes. And back in the day, winemakers that didn't have a strong scientific understanding of why this made your wine richer and sweeter, they just thought that it was evidence that God had blessed your crop. But now we know how to inoculate and how to protect against certain kinds of spores, and we also know how to introduce this particular kind of spore. And so there are winemakers that actively seek this particular mold on their crops because of the end result it can have on their grapes after fermentation has taken place. Mm-hmm. The way that it affects their wine. So, in blue cheese and any number of things, pickling and such. So there are microbial activities that are good and that are pleasant, and then there are things that will make you sick and that will ruin your tobacco.
And that's what your nose is
so,
for.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. I rely on my senses to tell me whether or not this is something that my gut reaction is that I want to throw up, or my gut reaction is I want to eat it.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's where we all meet in the middle, is that, you know, it could be some sort of mold, that's fine, but that I keep trying to tell people is that, and it's a lot of younger guys, because it's like, you know, it becomes like a science versus like faith issue for people online. Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting is that this mold debate kind of happened with the advent of social media. And so I was talking to Woody over at Marty's Cigar over in Pasadena. It's one of the last places left. It's not private. You can go in. You know, I sat down with a cigar with a bunch of the fellas and just had a conversation. And it was a beautiful thing.
Sure.
And I was talking with Marty. I brought this up. There was a guy there that had written some stuff for Cigar Aficionado. And Marty himself was a distributor at one time of tobacco in the area. And I brought up the bloom versus mold debate. And he's like, you know what the problem is that these guys, they just become religious about it. Like that they have this paper, and that if you don't admit that it's mold, he's like, it's not mold, for God's sakes. It's like, you know, because that is the thing, is that, you know, you do have a lot of different, you know, the crystallization is probably not the bloom. You know, it's like you said, it's probably the casing or the sugar of the leaf, or it could be something from the fermenting process. Like, it could be a lot of different things. No reason to argue about it, but people get into really crazy debates about it. It's pretty funny.
Yes, that's true. Well, people can be very, very dogmatic about all sorts of things, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, so the last thing I wanted to ask you, because I've been really digging Star of the East. It's a very, very good blend. Got it right in front of me. It's what
awesome.
It's what I've been enjoying while we've been having this conversation. I noticed a little flake in there, crumbled up. Is there some pressed stuff in there, or does that just happen to be like a leaf that got smashed?
Well, the way that tobacco is cut, whether you're talking about in ribbon or flake or whatever, you add moisture to it so that it doesn't just shatter into dust. Yeah. And then you have to kind of press it. So tobacco gets cut kind of by the same sort of mechanics that you would chiffonade basil.
Okay, gotcha. You roll it up.
Yeah, exactly. You roll it so that there's tension on the leaf. Well, in the case of a tobacco cutter, there's weights that basically hold pressure on the tobacco, and you create what we call a cheese. So that you get this nice, even, consistent slice across a pressed block of tobacco over and over and over again, like slicing cheese.
Nice.
So that there is a little bit of what looks like broken off flake in there, just is probably a bit of leaf that kind of adhered more,
compressed by the cutter,
and stayed together when it got cut.
Gotcha. So let me ask you a question.
So in Star of the East, there is no flake cut tobacco that we then break back out and move into that blend. But we do obviously make a flake version of it.
Right. So that's my next question. A lot of people compare the flake version of this to Penzance. What do you say about that?
Honestly, I think there is a closer relationship between Sunset Harbor and Penzance, personally.
Tell me why.
But there's just we accomplished a similar cut to Penzance. So Penzance is basically a crumble flake.
Right.
So
I think you just coined a new term, by the way.
What's that?
I said, I think you just coined a new term. I've never heard of crumble flake.
I can't take credit for it. I think, in fact, if you look at old Kingfisher description, they use that term as well.
Oh, okay.
Also made by Germain's, same sort of texture. So rather than taking stripped leaf tobacco and pressing it to create a flake, you take cut tobacco, ribbon cut tobacco, and press it to make a crumble cake, and then you cut that cake into flake. And so when you have Penzance and you rub it out and it just breaks apart into basically little cubes,
right?
That's why, because it is not pressed leaf that has been stripped; it's pressed ribbon.
Yeah, that's why I was telling people
it crumbles right apart.
That's why I was telling people Penzance not really a flake.
Right. Yeah, it is a crumble flake, like a crumble cake, but just cut into flake. Just the same way that plug gets cut into flake, crumble cake gets cut into flake and becomes crumble cake. And I'm pretty sure they use that term on the old Kingfisher tin.
Have you ever had the Smoker's Haven crumble cake? Yes,
I have. Yep.
Talk to me about it slowly and in a deep voice. Wait, do you have any of it now?
I don't have any of it now, and it has been a long, long time, honestly. But I remember it being good, but I don't have a lot of clear memories of it beyond that. I think I was 4 or 5 years into my pipe smoking at that time.
So what year are we talking?
That would have been like 2007. Yeah.
Okay.
2007, 2008, somewhere right in there.
Well, you know that Penzance is based on crumble cake, right?
Yes. Yeah, I did know that. I don't know if it's the same. And like I say,
it's not.
I had it. I remember it being good, but I don't have a real clear memory of it.
They put more Lataki in it because what's his name? Steven? Is that the guy, Steven, at the Piedmont Tobacconist?
Okay.
Anyway, he liked Lataki, so there's a little bit more Lataki.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So so Sunset Harbor though, also pressed flake, crumble flake. Penzance, Germain's is doing something, man. They've got black magic. Can we just admit that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that all of the old blending houses have some sort of methodology up their sleeves, whether it is a particular casing that they use or a particular time frame that things get melded before they cut, or a temperature that they're playing in, or something. But a lot of those things are unique to the manufacturer and their trade secret.
Well, I think
So yeah, you're right. They're doing something, but what that something is, I could only guess at.
Can I take a guess?
Sure.
Okay. You ever just be smoking especially in the Smoker's Haven blends, but there's through all of those Germain's blends, there's a linseed oil something going on. I always get that sense of linseed oil. You know that smell that I'm talking about?
I do. I've always kind of gotten an oily flavor.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's it.
It's possible. Anything is possible.
Think about a casing that contains a bit of oil. That wouldn't be unusual.
No, it wouldn't.
Because you know what the thing is that when I taste Star of the East, when I taste Black House, when I taste plum pudding, when I taste all of the Balkan blends that are kind of they all trace their roots kind of back to the Balkan sobriety, and when I taste Germain's, I've got some original from the 1920s Balkan sobriety on its way to my house right now. So I'm gonna try that out.
Nice.
Yeah, no, totally. I was really thankful to find it. So I'm going to try it out. Hopefully it's still in good enough condition. It's coming in cigarette formation, unfortunately, but I'm going to just rub it out after I rehydrate it. Because I almost just wonder if it's not a Germain's thing, because I almost taste the flavor. It's almost like Germain's has a way of doing the Virginias, right? You know what I mean? It's like, so those Virginias are in all the blends. I'm like wondering, I love what Germain's does, but like, it's going to be really interesting for me to see, because like the Balkan Sassini was supposed to be the Balkan Sobrani, but the Balkan Sassini is a lot more like Star of the East. You know what I mean? Like, it's in more of that family. There's like, Germain's has done something just like they, with their methods, have kind of made it a little different, but I'm kind of wondering, like, what was the original one like? And that's where Pease like was talking about. He knows the recipe, but he doesn't know the methods.
Mm-hmm.
Can you venture just a guess? And we'll close this out after
that. I guess on which part?
Like, what might be the method? Like, Pease was talking about rat rays and how they had that copper drum that they used to cook the tobacco with copper. He says that, that cooking the tobacco with copper changes its characteristics. Have you ever tried that?
No, I never have. Most of my time experimenting with tobacco has really been geared towards experimenting with things that we could then move into production.
Sure.
And if I had to hand saute every
tin of fire cake
sprig of tobacco that came out of our factory, just so we would never get anything done. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at like, such and such a temperature for so many hours, or stoving in the tin versus stoving in individual blending components prior to blending and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like there was a scientific methodology that Rattrays figured out, or maybe not a scientific one, but at least one that they adhered to and followed consistently, that did have a lot to do with stoving in a copper pan to get certain effects on the tobacco. Mm-hmm. But I don't even know what exactly those effects were. Okay.
Well, let me ask you this.
I've just heard legend and lore about it.
Sure. But would you say that Cornell and Diehl also, because for me, like Cornell and Diehl, like I've said before, the leaf tastes almost organic. It's almost like, and Pease talks about this a lot in his blending too, that he wants the true characteristics of the leaf to shine through. Whereas those other guys, they really seem to be doing a lot of processing to the leaf so that it tastes like something different when it comes out the other side. Per Jensen, by the way, doing the same thing with McBarron, right? To where that leaf, you open a tin. I opened that tin of Stockton the other day, and it smelled like a graham cracker. You know what I mean? When you, whereas if I open a tin of, say, penny farthing, you get that rich, and that's one of the things I too is dark, rich Virginia rot. It smells like a noble rot to me. Like, I always describe it kind of like that. You know what I mean? Like, it smells like a rich, dark sweetness that's almost got that petrichor kind of, smell after the rain. Like the rot.
Sure.
But what do you think that is there any kind of like specific methods that you use to treat your Virginias, or do you just kind of try to let them come across more organically? I mean, is there anything you can share with us in that route?
I think that's basically the thing that I would point to as setting us apart as a manufacturer in a lot of ways, is the lack of processing. We have a handful of blends that get a casing, and that casing is specifically for that individual blend. But overall, in the hundreds of products that we produce, the vast majority of them have no casing whatsoever. Even if it's an aromatic and has a topping, there's not a casing added to it. And if it's a non-aromatic, there's no casing and no topping. So we are already really, really hands off in terms of the majority of our output. In terms of additions to the tobacco, and in terms of processing, you're talking about on a per blend basis, some blends that get stoved prior to pressing, some blends that get stoved after they are packaged, some individual blending components that get stoved for a few hours. One individual component that gets steamed and cased to be used as a blending component in 4 blends. I mean, our processes are really minor, and they are really specific. We do not do big processing of the majority of the leaf that we're using, and we do not do a lot of in-depth processing. It's very, very specific, and on a blend by blend basis. And I think that's the thing that more than anything else sets us apart, is how little we do to the leaf.
Nice. Okay, last thing I'm going to wrap up just with one thing for Joe Langford, because Joe's getting up there in age, and he mentioned that when he got his start that I think he bought a press from Craig Tarler. I don't know if you know the story or not, but didn't Joe have some input on Mountain Camp, one of those blends? He very well may have. I don't doubt that at all, but I don't know the specifics of it. Okay, well, not a big deal. I think it was a mystery. Maybe I'm not even supposed to reveal it, so I might cut this out. But just do me a favor.
No, I mean, I have no qualms with it at all. I don't know the story.
No big deal.
But a lot of our blends were blends that actually came through collaborative efforts between Craig and his customers. So that's not an uncommon thing.
Right, and Joe had a tobacco shop in Kansas City.
Right.
Do you know Joe at all? Have you met him?
Yes, I met Joe. I haven't seen him in several years, but I did meet him at the Chicago show 3, maybe 4 years ago.
Nice. Okay, well, do me just one last favor and say something nice about Joe. I'd like to have a quote from you to play for him.
Sure. Well, I remember having dinner with Joe Langford, and what I remember was that he was a really, really funny guy and really gracious.
Yeah, he seems really humble, too.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for your time, Jeremy. I appreciate you taking the time, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
That was a
an amazing interview with the great Jeremy Reeves, blender of Cornell Diehl. You know, I wanted to do that interview with Jeremy, and we'll be doing one with Greg Pease of GLPs later, to kind of address something that Mike from McClelland said when he left the business, that there just wasn't any good leaf available anymore, and that he couldn't source the quality that he wanted, so he was hanging up his spurs. The thing is that a lot of people, you know, take offense to that because, I mean, everybody else still has to go to work every day and do their job. And, you know, there's less ornamental varietals, but that was true, you know, 15 years before Mike stopped. So there's still, you know, people still know how to plant seeds in the earth and grow tobacco. It grows almost by itself. I walk out in the Hollywood Hills, and every 10 feet, there's a naturally growing tobacco plant. Unfortunately, it's tree tobacco, so it's poisonous. Otherwise, I'd be tinning that stuff up myself. So I had some friends that spent a good deal of time in Syria. They were missionaries. One time he was telling me that he saw, like, you know, sometimes you used to see those big giant missiles in the, like, Russian march parades. He said he saw one of those missiles on the back of a flatbed truck, and it was being held up by, like, 9 guys just holding their hands against it as it, you know, drove down the street. I don't think there'd be a problem finding labor to hold, you know, tobacco in the sun. Let's bring back Latakia. People always think you're crazy if you think that you could change the world, but, you know, never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world, because, I mean, you know, indeed it is the only thing that ever has.